Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Leadership Matters webinar, the final conversation in our three-part series on building inclusive workplace culture in times of crisis and beyond. My name is Kate Glantz. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Director of Economic Opportunity and Empowerment at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. In my role at the foundation, I work with the private sector on initiatives that advance economic opportunity for marginalized and underserved communities. Over the last couple of weeks, we've explored workplace culture as it intersects with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And today, we'll examine the current and evolving landscape of corporate culture from the perspectives of the executives who are setting the tone and guiding their organizations through these unprecedented times. Before I hand it over to our moderator, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and for acknowledging that there is more work to be done. Building equity and resilience within our organizations will require all of us at every level of seniority to advocate and create more inclusive ways of doing business. So wherever you are in your journey, welcome. We are so glad that you're here with us today. Quick housekeeping note, all participants will be muted, but you can submit questions at any time through GoToWebinar's chat function. Today's presentation will be recorded and archived on the Chamber Foundation website, and we'll be sure to share a link with you when we follow up via email later this week. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Karen Ajakum, who will guide today's conversation. Karen is the Principal of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at the Raven Group. Karen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for hosting this discussion and this series. Again, we'll remind you that this is being recorded and all participants are muted, and you're welcome to ask your questions throughout the session in the chat function. So yes, we are certainly in unprecedented times. The end of first quarter found many of us sheltering at home while trying to get work done, which is very different from working from home. And we're doing this amid caregiving responsibilities. Many of us have pre-existing conditions that are possibly exacerbated by the pandemic, or now we're just struggling with isolation, being so far away from loved ones. We've also learned that marginalized identities, and in particular people of color, are experiencing disproportionate health impacts and a higher death rate, more than our majority counterparts. Now we're in the midst of greater attention to the racial injustice and civil unrest that has gone on for decades. Conversations like these with the illustrious panel that I'll introduce in just a moment give us a chance to stop, take inventory of where we are. It gives us a chance to share solutions and to broaden our thinking, and most importantly, to find community in these very complicated times. With that, I'd like to introduce you to your panelists for this discussion. So first, we have Soon Mi Kim. She is the Executive Vice President and Global Diversity and Inclusion Leader at Porter Novelli. We have Amy George Leary, who is the Global Talent Officer at Booz Allen Hamilton. And then we have Eric Mitchell, Assistant Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at AT&T. Welcome. Thank you all for joining me. So let's just get started, and I'm going to actually toss it over to you first, Amy. So we're all dealing with a lot right now. You're collectively taking care of hundreds of thousands of employees, but what I want to know is how you're taking care of yourself while you're steering this change, and how has communication between your workforce and your leadership changed in these moments?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I'm very excited to be here. First, thank you for asking how I'm doing. I am doing very well. I'm very fortunate. My family is healthy. Everybody's been together. We're taking advantage of this time together and just enjoying each other. From an organizational perspective, we really took a people first philosophy, right? We wanted to make sure that we keep each other and our loved ones safe and healthy. That's primary, that's number one. But it doesn't mean it's been easy, right? We're all, overnight, many of us saw our routines change drastically. Everyone is now teleworking. We have new coworkers, like you mentioned. I have a college kid out here taking a class right behind me. We're sharing spaces. We're, figuring all of that out. Many parents are becoming teachers, right? And a lot of people are also feeling isolated. So we're dealing with just a broad spectrum of different needs, different circumstances, different situations. as in the talent space and leading in the talent space, we have to make sure that we're managing to all of them, right? And so this video capability has just boomed overnight, right? We're all using video, and that is a way that for sure we can, stay connected. We're actually hearing people feeling like they're more connected now because they're seeing each other in a different way than they had in the past. So it's creating those opportunities to see people, to connect with one another. We're also seeing, though, that boundaries between life and work are getting thinner, right? And that is something that we have to make sure that we're dealing with, and we're helping leaders like set boundaries so that everybody can rest, recover. So, I'm encouraging my team and people across our company, shorten meetings, give yourself a break. We used to get up and walk from one room to another. We're not doing that anymore. So how do you create that space and that boundaries to take a mental break? I think that, I have a new puppy, so I'm trying to not always be on video, but take a call so I can walk the dog and be outside for half a minute. So that we're thinking about that. We have started at our company some top-down communications and connecting. We have CEO office hours, and we've done things like that where we've opened it up to everybody in the firm, and they've been able to call in. We're encouraging our leaders and giving them toolkits to host and have conversations. We've done newsletters where we're pushing information, and content aggregators where people can go find when they're ready to find. So those are the communication vehicles we're using. Again, top down, team oriented, corporate wide push and aggregation of information to try to make it available for where people need it when they need it. So that's a little bit about what we're doing.
That's so great. And I love the focus on self-care. I've got a new employee myself. She's 5 years old, and I totally get it. And the space around as being healers, really needing to look for those resources when you're in need of healing, particularly during these times. That's great. I'm also very impressed with the CEO office hours. As people are traveling less, there's an opportunity for more accessibility to our C-suite, which is fantastic. So thinking about and staying in the space of COVID and sort of the adjustment of policies and programs as you're working to support the full breadth of employee needs, can you talk a little bit about what has changed for you, in addition to how even stakeholders may be different during these times? Amy, you can continue, or Eric, would love to have you support that question as well.
So I would say that because of the way that we work collaboratively across the business and for diversity and inclusion, we've got really a lot of the same partners, but it's the ones who are having to come forward a little bit more now compared to what they did in the past. So with COVID-19 in particular, as Amy was saying, we very much wanted to take care of our people first. We had a day, I think it was March 16th, we told everyone, go home. You're working from home, don't report, into work. Many people already had capabilities to work from home. It was just, a sudden decision that they needed to move. But we have emphasized, for example, that because of what people are experiencing now, let's make sure that we have our EAP resources. And they can be for any kind of stress, tension. It's not, extreme cases of substance abuse or alcoholism. It's there as a broad service, and let's make sure that you know that. And then we have provided other self-care tools to employees for them to be able to really understand how they can manage in this new environment. And everyone gets involved. Our training organization regularly puts out short-form videos once or twice a week. And the theme, of course, now has changed to thriving in the new normal and giving people really practical tools in a brief format that they can begin to apply the day that they see the video to make things much more manageable for themselves, because it is a big adjustment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when this all began, we really took a look at sort of our values, the commitment that we're making to our people. I'm sure many of our companies have done that. And we put forward that we're all in it together. And that really touched multiple stakeholder groups for us, right? So we put forward 3 priorities that really guided all of our decision making, which included our move to mandatory telework for everybody. And we're still in that position. And we put about $100 million in reprioritizing our budget towards policies, changes to enhance the employee support that was needed, and also amping up our resilience programs. But you know, we really were about protecting the health and safety of our people. And a lot of everything that we did was focused at that, their families and our communities. We looked at supporting our clients and how did we help our clients also be able to respond. So not only supporting the work and that partnership, but how could we help them in this time? And then third, just making sure that we could maintain the financial and institutional resiliency of our firm, right? So we didn't have to lay off, so that we didn't have to, you know, do things differently, but what did we need to sort of do to ensure that resiliency? And so all of those three things for us were really the guideposts that really drove some of the decisions that we made.
I really love that, the focus on people first and really leaning in instead of backing away from your employees at this critical time where your organizations now more than ever need to be nimble and innovative, not just to survive, but to thrive. So, you know, we can't do that if we have employees who are burnt out, working from a lack mentality, and who are just ultimately trying to figure out, you know, how they are going to survive with the responsibilities they have in this new environment. So thank you, Amy and Eric, for, again, everything that you're doing and for sharing it with us. So intersecting with individuals that may be experiencing life circumstances differently because of the pandemic, we all know that structural racism persists as we look at the racial disparities with regard to experiences with COVID, and now, of course, layering in the heightened civil unrest around racial injustice. I'd love to start with you, Sunmi, to talk a little bit about what you're doing for your Black employees right now, and how you're creating forums to talk about race and bias and all of the systems that sort of underpin where we are right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen, and thank you so much to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for just facilitating this conversation overall. I think what's really interesting of this moment is that we are talking about not just racism, we're not talking about just individual racism, but I think it's really remarkable that we are talking about structural racism. And so, as I've seen so many corporate statements talking about, you know, what people see, what people are going to do, and in this moment also use those terms, I think it's really, really important. And what I think we need to also just be aware of when organizations speak of structural racism, that's an opportunity for us to really look inward. I know right now there's a lot of desire to act, right? To like, what can we do? What can we do? But I heard Bernice King say this: the journey is about looking in the mirror, not looking out the window. And so how I think about that is at an individual level, that means we've got to do our work, right? We've got to read our books, we've got to watch our movies, we've got to talk with our family members, we've got to do all of those things, certainly at that personal level. But at an organizational level, it means that we really do have to put a spotlight on that entire organizational system as well, right? In terms of our board makeup, how we report on our numbers, how we think about our C-suite, how we retain and attract, what are the ways that we're supporting each other, but also our culture. I think that's really, really critical as well. So you asked, Karen, about like how are we supporting our Black colleagues? It's in many ways. In many ways, our Black colleagues are supporting us. And so I think it's a mistake to kind of think of this as like a one way and kind of assume that just because you have a certain title or your office is in a certain location that you have all of the answers. No, people have been thinking about this for a long time, including the diversity professionals within your organization. It was not too long ago that there was a question like, okay, how integral and critical are these roles in light of COVID as we think about business continuity? And then in this moment, I think it's super clear, if it's not already integral, if it's not already a part of your culture and you have not been thinking about these things, you know, that's too bad.
That's right.
Yeah. So I would just say the ways that we have been supporting our Black colleagues and they have been supporting us is through conversations. And I don't say casual conversations, but or courageous conversations. They're just conversations. Hopefully we have created a situation where that is the norm. But yeah, through a variety of ways, we are trying to put the spotlight on people who know and can truly be themselves in this moment and share and also teach and guide along the way as co-partners.
I love that. Eric, yes, please. I was tossing to you next.
So, we had the benefit of having many years of a focus on diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it, inclusive practices were already in a lot of our HR processes, some of them behind the scenes, but, they were definitely in play. But when the focus got really sharp onto racial injustice, we started leveraging some of the tools we had even more. So lots of conversation. I've spoken with many of my Black colleagues who are in general management who have been taking calls, personal calls from peers who share feelings, from white colleagues who want to understand, want to help, want to act, want to express empathy for what's going on. We have leaders who are convening the Black executives in their organizations to let them express themselves in a way that they may not have before. And then we've got larger groups of employees coming together in order to talk about these issues in a way that we haven't before. So, and even in the way that we provide training. So, we of course had training on unconscious bias and microaggressions, and well, that language has changed because that's the polite language. Now we're talking about racism. We're talking about mistreatment of people and the historical mistreatment of people. And so we're able to actually raise the tone in a way that we had not been able to do before because it's what everyone is focused on. And so that's been very good. Now, of course, talking is great and people love that because they need to, some of it is just the process of expressing what they feel, knowing there's camaraderie and support. But then we know that there's already a building sentiment for employees to say, well, okay, enough talking, what are we going to do? And so we have provided employees resources through our diversity and inclusion website where they can educate themselves on these issues related to the Black community, and then to find ways to act as employees of AT&T in order to really represent our corporate values.
No, that's so great. Oh, please, Amy, yes.
Karen, I was just going to add one point here, just how similar the approaches are, and from everything Sumi said to Eric, like we picked it up the same way, which is listen, learn, and then act, right? And what I heard the two of them say is very much aligned to that. So I do think that those are some of the best practices and the best ways that we're seeing a lot of organizations are really leaning in here, and it really starts with good listening.
No, I think everything that the three of you have said collectively is sort of spot on. We as a firm, actually, as you can imagine, had many organizations reach out for support with statements and advice. And we literally put out a emailer just sort of saying, you've put out a statement, now what, right? And it's everything absolutely that all of you are talking about. Stop interrogating Blackness, seek to understand whiteness, go beyond sort of the talk at some point to action, right? When you are talking, have it be inward with networks and friends and family members as well as colleagues, and really seek to read and learn and watch and listen, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens, to your point, Sumi, for those of us who have been doing this work for a while, once the headlines are sort of old news, how much we continue to see action. We really are working to counsel people against sort of this time of where performative activism and allyship could really rear its ugly head. So I appreciate you continuing.
And you make it, and because we're already getting our employees saying, I hope this isn't just as long as this crisis is in the news. As soon as it's out of the news, we forget about it and get back to our knitting. We've made public commitments on how AT&T is going to participate in trying to correct racial injustice. And the sense is, we know it's not going to be done in a month, maybe a year. It's going to be a long journey. And so how do we make sure that we sustain ourselves as we go through this, get all the way through to the end?
I think that's right. So staying in this space with vulnerable populations, we know, and with COVID, we know that there are tremendous challenges for, again, caregivers, people who are low income, and again, just traditionally more vulnerable. And this moment is exacerbating those vulnerabilities. Amy, would love for you to talk a little bit more about what you're doing there at your organization around flexibility and accommodating employees with resources like adequate work from home space, Wi-Fi, et cetera.
Yeah, so, since this whole pandemic began, we have been hearing from our employees, right? We have really good mechanisms for where we're capturing feedback, and very loud and clear, the number one thing was job security, right? And then it was flexibility. Then it was more PTO options, right? Depending on where you fall in that spectrum of needing it now or not being able to use it. Parental support, tools, safe workspaces. If you're not able to telework, right? Because we have some clients that, we have some highly classified work and things like that where, making it safe. And then the last piece was we did get a lot of feedback on easing isolation, right? So as I mentioned earlier, our objective was to really create a plan to create sufficient optionality to support a very diverse workforce and where their needs were and meet them where they were. And, the situation continues to change and people's needs may continue to change. So we really looked at a few critical areas. So in the job security space, we came out very quickly to say that there would be no layoffs. Everybody would be completely secure until July 1. And then we would do an assessment, right? So we gave people that sort of stability out of the gate. We, worked on creating ways to get people additional opportunities if their opportunities were no longer there. So there's a number of things that we did in that sort of job security space. We, changed our teleworking policies, our expense policies, so people could purchase the equipment that they needed. We created a way for people to go into the office and retrieve some equipment or some supplies if they needed them in a safe way. So we did created some digital toolkits and gave people licenses to tools, right, that they may not have had, like whiteboarding tools and things like that were not commonplace before all of this happened. So there were a number of things like that. We obviously had our accommodations team, so where there were special accommodations required, we funneled through our standard accommodations process so that we could manage that and made sure that that was clear. Around workplace flexibility, because this was critical for parents, for people that had, different demands, we really looked at like about 6 or so different options. We increased our PTO accrual max so that people wouldn't lose time off, right? So we gave everybody an additional 80 hours. We were allowing employees to carry a negative balance. So if they were dealing with something, maybe managing kids and they needed to take additional PTO, we were allowing them to go into the hole. And then we amped up around our PTO donation program up to an additional 160 hours where, colleagues could donate time and people could get time. So we really pushed a lot in this flexibility around PTO. Another big win I thought we had was around dependent care. So we saw some schools and daycare, with all those closures, some individuals were having to pay for daycare providers to come to their home and then pay their daycare center to secure and keep their spot. So to help our employees, we provided a one-time FSA contribution of an additional $2,000 so that they could use that money to pay for additional childcare. And then we put more flexibility into FSA elections, allowing employees to make adjustments as they needed. And then this fall, we're adding one more program to expanding backup benefits for daycare, emergency daycare options, right? Giving people that additional. And I also mentioned earlier, we established an employee resilience fund. We changed, some of the parameters around that. So the COVID-19 issues were able to apply for that and get up to $10,000 of support. And our firm dropped in an additional $5 million to support people with circumstances that were very challenging. So those were a number of the very specific things that we did to sort of address various needs and populations. So anyway, just some of the examples of what we've done.
No, I think that's great. And the ways in which you've poured in to your paid time off policy and allowing colleagues to support other colleagues, again, creating community during these really difficult times is fantastic. It's really exciting to hear. Eric, did you have anything to add before we move
No,
on?
I mean, very similar things, which is creating greater flexibility in the programs we already had. One of the things that we did do is, many of our, we're AT&T, right? Many of our employees have the ability to work from home. They have the tools for doing that and the connectivity. But for environments where that wouldn't have been the norm, so let's say our customer care agents and call centers, we did find a way to actually let them work from home virtually. They knew how to do their work. They would just do it in a different environment. And we're able to set that up for a period of time. Then with our stores, retail employees, many of our stores had to close or they had to move to more virtual ways, curbside delivery, contactless activation of services. But we found other work that they could do from wherever they were in order to be able to continue to make a contribution and be active employees. So it's worked out quite well for us.
That's great. Yes, another really important note for both of you around that job security. I think as organizations have had to deal with closing their doors, offboarding, reduction of salary, it's wonderful to hear what AT&T and Zell and Hamilton are doing to support their employees in staying in the workforce, which is really amazing. So sticking with talent for just a moment, Sunmi, you said something earlier that really certainly resonated with me around sort of continuing to make the case for the work that we do in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice space, particularly during these times when things can be prioritized away, and then how we've certainly seen that about face with the current headlines. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you've continued to manage through all of this, the business case for our work, and how you've been able to really continue to lean into a focus on acquiring and retaining diverse staff in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different ways to answer that question, and I have to laugh a little bit because I've been nodding, very vigorously. So I think I'm definitely burning some calories as I listen to this great panel. Yeah, I think part of, sadly maybe, but part of the kind of role of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that we are constantly having to make the case, right? Because I think, for example, at this moment, if you have to explain the moral imperative, I'm like, I got nothing for you. I think the moral imperative is clear. And then things swing the other way, where you have to make, the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I find that sometimes very frustrating as well. And I was having a conversation with someone just recently, like, you know what, it's actually, to have a diverse group and to operate within diversity takes longer. And I'm like, no. What takes longer is when you don't have a diversity in any shape or form, and then you make mistakes, and then you now have to correct those mistakes. That's actually what takes longer. I think the business case is very clear. You don't have to go far. Just do a simple Google search on the moral imperative as well as the business imperative. And yet, there are times like this, times like the global pandemic and so forth, that bring some of the clarity that we need. So in our case, more specific to your question about what can we be doing, I think our organization, like many, we're not in a place where we can do a lot of hiring, right? We have to kind of wait and see what's going on with the economy and so forth. And we're trying to do our very best to do right by our people and run a successful organization. But what I think this also lends itself to is, again, going back to the reflection. Where are our systems that need that spotlight? Where are areas that we can be making those improvements and corrections? There's no reason for us to not be building our pipeline when we have the time and a really rich source of talent out there to connect on a very authentic and human level. There's a program that I just picked up personally called Mentor Mondays. And it was all formed by the fact that we have so many fantastic intern candidates, and our intern program unfortunately was delayed until the fall because of COVID and other things. But that's easy. I mean, we've all proven that we can work in this remote environment. We all have access to things like WebEx and Zoom and GoToMeeting and connect over what would have been barriers before, right? So to be able to have access to people and their ideas and to pour into them and bring our networks together to create connections that wouldn't have existed, I just think that right now presents actually more opportunity to challenge some of those assumptions about connecting in person and even forging those connections at all that we really need to look at and again, challenge our assumptions.
That's great.
Yeah, I would like to end on what Suni shared, because fortunately for us, we don't have to put much effort into proving the business case for diversity and inclusion, because we have a commitment from our CEO that's been in place for many years. So really what our challenge has been to continue to meet the expectations that people have on what we already had underway. And not just to say, well, what we're in now is clearly creating a stop for everything. Nope, that wasn't the expectation. Just as the rest of the business kept running, this focus on diversity and inclusion had to continue running. And in particular, well, a couple of ways. So one, it was, well, you virtualized work. How are you going to virtualize this work? We had one program in particular that was running during this period. It's a Women of Color Professional Development Program, which would have been, we bring all the participants together, we have a wonderful session, and with speakers and panelists and networking. Well, we had to find a way to fully virtualize that program. We didn't say the program was going to be delayed. We're going to continue in the way that we're now doing work. Same thing with internships. It was very interesting. Internships is a real rich source for us to bring diverse talent into the business. And we start when they're freshmen in college and let them intern every year until they're graduates and hopefully come to work for us, because who else are they going to work for at that point? But what we had to do is we virtualized the internship program. And we found a way to, if we're working virtually, okay, intern, this is a little odd. You're not showing up at this new big corporate office and meeting all these people. Well, you are, but it's in a virtual environment. And we've even created a platform where they would normally do network in in-office events and mixers. They're doing it in a virtual environment, meeting executives and leaders beyond the work group that they're assigned to, in order to continue to build that professional exposure, professional network, as they do the work that we've been getting to do to grow their skills and then create a bond with them that we hope to tap into and eventually hire them. And then thinking about folks who couldn't do internships because of the structure of the businesses they would have been working with, we've created a summer academy, which really, I think of it as an externship, but we've taken a lot of our training resources, professional skills development resources, and we've put them out on a public platform that anyone can access. And so it's like, well, if your internship evaporated, you can do this. We offer this for you, and and it's available. It's in English, but anyone around the world can access it. So people can still, make productive use of this time for their continued professional development.
That's so great. I love, and now I'm assuming now I'm getting my calories in with the nodding. I love the thought of, helping fix the mistakes versus us sort of locking arms at the beginning to kind of forge down a path. I can definitely sort of relate to that. And everything that you said around, both of you, around just sort of leaning into this moment when we're now more virtually connected than ever, and finding ways to continue the work with things like internship programs, Mentoring Mondays. I wrote that note. That's fabulous. And your Women of Color development. That's phenomenal. So staying with advocating and being allies for our people, and Amy, I'm going to toss this one to you first. We all know that each of you included are sort of modeling the behavior that your workforce and your peers and any of the levels in between are really looking for when it comes to this allyship, right? Like really showing up for your people. Starting with you, Amy, can you share an action or several that you and other leaders have taken to be allies towards a more inclusive work environment?
Yeah, happy to. we have, like many companies, some pretty mature diversity practices inside our organization. But I will tell you, over the last several weeks, we have taken that opportunity to look in the mirror, right, and to talk to a lot of people in the organization. Actually, our CEO and our leadership team authored a letter and asked for input. And we collected that input and said, so what actions can we take? What should we do as an organization? And we asked everybody to share that. And as a result, we landed on 6 actions that our leadership committed to taking collectively. Clearly, we don't have all the answers, but I think the heartfelt feedback that we got really gave us a direction to go. So first, we agreed to launch an independent review of all of our business practices and how they impact people of color. So like I said, we really need to hold that mirror up and say, where are we? We've made some great progress, but we believe we have a ways to go. The second thing we're committing to do is increase personal time and space for reflection and mental health. So one quick thing that we were able to do is we had Columbus Day as a holiday. Well, we're converting that into a floating well-being holiday, so people can take it anytime. If somebody wants to take it on Columbus Day, they can. If they want to take it tomorrow for their mental health, they can, and that will go forward, ongoing. We're also sharing tips and resources on how to create space and time, right? How to be empathetic leaders as well, and different things like that. Clearly, like everyone else, making sure that our education programs, we're pushing those, leveraging those, making sure people understand what's available. We've done a series around Let Us Be Heard listening circles. Over the last couple of weeks, we have formal education. Again, we gave toolkits to our leaders on how to navigate conversations. A lot of people aren't comfortable or knowing even how to start having conversations to listen. So making sure that people are equipped to do that. We are honoring Juneteenth for the first time as an organization, and have plans to take that forward as well. And then doing some matching donations for nonprofits, again, selected nonprofits in this space to focus on racial injustice. A couple other things just quickly is that, we're looking at how do we intensify our investment in accountability on increasing representation, which again has been part of our agenda, but really feel like maybe the accountability isn't all the way where it needs to be to make the difference that we want to make. And then the last two sort of, how do we use our firm's capabilities and our voice to advance the cause of social justice, and then really make that a major element of our corporate philanthropy, and asking our leaders to donate and lead by example. So again, this is the feedback that we have collected, what people would like to see from us in our organization. So we were able to sort of articulate those around those 6 key actions and some immediate steps that we've taken to lean in on those actions.
Thank you so much, Amy. I love the notion of the Let Us Be Heard listening circles, and I too will be celebrating and commemorating on Juneteenth. So thank you for that. Sunni, Eric, anything to add?
Well, the one thing that I would add, I think for our group, is that we're really focused on making things very personal. And so when we first came in trying to how can we best support our people, we put the spotlight on our people, right? So we had our town hall was not an opportunity for us to parade our senior executives, but put spotlight on people who know and are doing the work. And then followed by very important conversations on an office by office level. We recognized Blackout Tuesday as an opportunity to disconnect or support however you need, or just take that time to really unplug however you need to. And then we followed that up with daily opportunities to learn. So to focus on implicit bias. We had one session that was focused on whiteness and whiteness 101, as well as what it means to be an ally. And we pivoted all our programs in such a way to create at least weekly, if not twice weekly programming on to help folks learn, but also how we can serve as better counselors in our roles as consultants to our communications consultants to our clients. And so in a variety of ways to really kind of think about that holistically. But I think the other thing that's important to note in all of this is just the personal part. So I'm going to just brag on my CFO. Hopefully he might not see this, but normally we don't think of our CFO as the person who's going to be the person that's reaching out. But wow, attended every single training, every single workshop, reached out to our Black colleagues to say like, hey, I got your back. I've got you. To say like, I would like personal coaching. You know, how can I best support? As a CFO, I can't necessarily be out there on social media for some other reasons, but are there other ways that I can be supportive? And I'm like, absolutely, let's talk about this. So that's just one example, but I think that's the key is like when this is personal to you, when things matter. I think even in my own journey, in my current role, this is because I am a beneficiary of a diverse and inclusive workplace. And so when things are happening and these terrible tragedies are happening and they're affecting my Black colleagues and we are connected, how can it not impact me? How can I not want to do something authentically? It's just because I cannot not support people who are my dearest friends. So I think just like making this connection to the fact this is really personal, the fact that we have to address not only from a systemic racism standpoint of just these words, but truly for us it is also confronting whiteness, white fragility in order to be uncomfortable to make progress.
I love that. And Eric, I want to hear from you as well, but I think this is a perfect moment. We had a question chatted in. How do you balance listening with the burden that, I guess, explaining puts on Black colleagues right now?
So I would tell you that is definitely something that's come up. And I think what we do is, again, to Suni's point, we make it personalized. So I have talked to Black colleagues who have told me, I can't keep teaching and explaining to other people. I'm tired, Eric. I'm exhausted. And we say, fine, take a rest, step aside. There are plenty of other people who are now ready to raise their voices and say the thing that they wanted someone to hear for so long. And we've given our employees an opportunity to do that through some of our corporate communication programs where it's not just the leaders speaking, it's our own Black employees sharing their personal experiences and the impact what's going on is having on them and their families. And then we amplify that through our corporate social media and give them an opportunity to speak up and let someone else step back for a minute on that. So we also are realizing as we design our responses, it can't be, well, the burden is on the Black employees to do all the work. Come and explain your culture to us. Come and explain the problems. We have other resources that can do that. We can give you books. We have a bunch of films in our Warner Media, arsenal that you can look at. Just Mercy is an example. If you don't understand what's going on, just take a look at that. So we give people a lot of different ways to take in the information. So it's not that our Black employees have to do all of that. And it's not just the Black employees as well, because we all need to help fix the problem. So, white employees, all people of color who are part of the workforce, everyone, if you need some education, we'll give you that. And then you're going to have to very quickly figure out what you're going to do to help move forward this whole commitment to creating racial equality with what you do in the business and what you can do in your community, what you can do with your family.
I love that. And I think it's spot on advice, right? There are those of us who have leaned in and said, yes, I do this for a living, so I will compartmentalize my need to heal and be there for you so that we can move the movement forward. And there are others that are like, you know what? I want to turn inward. I want to be with my family. I want to explain and counsel and help them heal and grieve. And it is about giving the options and really looking at this from all of the identities all of us wear, right? So I love that. So that's actually a great segue into one of our next questions around advocating for inclusive workplaces, right? So we've both been sort of nodding vigorously around this notion of sort of, all of the commitments to do better, right? And sort of what happens for organizations that are maybe just now realizing that this should be a priority. What would be your advice to them? And then how can individuals within their organizations hold their companies accountable for change long after the headlines?
Yeah, so here's the thing, Karen. I think we're in this, we don't have to worry about the how do we hold people accountable. Part of that is because this is what we know about Gen Z, is that they are watching. They are watching everything that we say. They are, yes, they are holding us accountable, making sure that when we espouse our values, is that really real? There was a really interesting example that I saw online. So someone who's a recent graduate of one of the universities was like, hey, I'm not really happy with this statement that I saw. It really didn't say anything. So this person took it upon himself to, let's see what all 189 colleges are saying. And I looked at it on a scale of like, did they say anything about Black Lives Matter? Did they talk about systemic racism? Did they say the names of the people that were affected, like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and others? And so anyway, looking at all of that, and created this Google spreadsheet that was, of course, available to anyone that was look at it, and was like, wow, I looked at all of this, and my university didn't get even a 6, they got a 0. They didn't mention any of these things. And there were like 4 of the 189 that didn't even put out a statement. So I bring all of this up to say that we don't have to worry about the accountability factor. I mean, people are paying attention, and we will be held accountable whether we say something or we don't. So then, that's why I think in terms of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, so much about it is culture, and honestly, transformative culture, and using culture as a way to, I think culture is so critical for inclusion. We can't have inclusion without a culture that embraces everyone. So yeah, that's what I would say to that, is that we know that about this group. We know, I can also tell you from Mentor Mondays that that's the kind of organization that Gen Z wants to be a part of. And so, if we really want to have the best talent as part of our organizations, we need to listen.
I think that's great. So it looks like we are coming close to time. We do have a couple of questions from the watching audience. Amy, I'm going to pinch this one over to you. Someone asked, how can certified minority and women-owned businesses best position themselves to work with these organizations? You mentioned before about doing a lot of community-related work. I would assume there would be an opportunity to engage with MWBEs and others. Can you share that at all? For Booz Allen Hamilton?
Well, my first response around that is sort of the way we do business is we network, we build relationships, right? You get to know what people's capabilities are, what small businesses' capabilities are, right? Working through the organizations in that regard. I think that's how, we tend to find collaborators, right? And so I would just say, advocate for yourselves, your capabilities, showcase them, find opportunities that, where you can show up and create those connections, right? I was even thinking about that previous question that you had just asked. And it was an interesting learning for me. Several years ago, I rotated into our innovation business. We have an innovation division. And for the first time in a long time, I was out of the talent space. I wasn't thinking about talent. I was thinking about innovation. And we created a whole series of what we called a culture of innovation, and ways for companies, startups, universities, our organization to come together and think and, create new solutions. We created things like Shark Tanks and, hackathons and various different things. And never once was I thinking about it from an inclusion lens. But what we really created was inclusive ways for people to collaborate and work. And a lot of it was like online, and you're sharing things. You don't know who's collaborating in a way, right? So it was an interesting learning for me. I'd spent so much time focused on how to create diversity and inclusion. I flipped my lens to innovation, and by accident. We created inclusion opportunities. So I think, looking at ways to get engaged in those types of things, to me, is good ways to sort of make those connections and get your capabilities noticed.
I love that. We've got another question. Let's see. This will be to you, Eric. How are you all coping with the economic pressures, closures, layoffs, et cetera, while still caring for your employees?
Well, it's always a real balance with our business operations. I mean, we announced today that part of our business transformation that we were in anyway before COVID-19 was accelerated by COVID-19. And, we have been actively working over the past 2-3 years to reduce our cost structure and in order to be more competitive and to meet the market requirements. And what we learned with COVID-19 is, well, we can have many, many more people in our workforce work virtually than we thought. So we're going to need less office space than we really always traditionally thought we did. We can provide services to our customers that doesn't require having a store on every corner. And we're finding ways to do that. So what we're finding is we're a balance between maintaining viability as a business with just the realities of how you make adjustments in the business. And while you're doing all of that, making sure that the practices you have to follow as you become a leaner company continue to be humane and continue to put people at the center of what you're doing.
Thank you so much for that. Another 2 questions for you, Soon-Mi. One person wants to know, how do you combat tokenism? We're having a moment here.
Yeah. I will say that's real. Here's what I think is really important with that. I mean, I think what people don't realize is like those microaggressions are real. We experience that. I remember even experiencing that as a young professional. I remember one of my very first meetings with a client was that, hey, everybody, and they gathered everyone around. They're like, I want you all to know that in my eyes, Soon-Mi is as American as everyone around this table. And yes. So, that's a maybe more graphic expression, but, these things are happening all the time because we all have our implicit biases. So many times people don't even know that, your work is being appropriated or these microaggressions are happening. And that's, also what we need to look at in this moment as we are reflecting on these, the issue of systemic racism in all of the environments that we are, part of. I mean, it is just a reality. But what I would also say is, for me, I take a lot of encouragement from what I am seeing on TV of people, young people especially, literally risking their lives in this moment to make transformative change. And so maybe for me, because of my role as a caregiver, that I can't necessarily be out protesting, but I can definitely use my voice, and then we all have platforms to make change in other ways. And so I try to just draw a lot of encouragement from, from people who are really leading this moment to follow that example.
I love that. Yes, I like to say that I do my protesting in the boardroom. So for sure, right, that level of corporate activism cannot be denied. Well, I have a fun question to end us on before I turn it over to Kate to close. Soon-Mi, someone wants to know about your books and what's your favorite? We were just talking about that earlier.
Oh, that is kind of a fun question. Yeah, I put some of these up here because I get a lot of questions about what can I read, and I'm happy to say that books like How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility, they're sold out right now. They're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the book in the bestseller list. But oh gosh, what? One thing that I will just say is my dear colleague Wayne Reed, who is a controller in our New York office, his his brother was actually killed by police back in 1998. And if anyone is in the Connecticut area, they will know this case very well. But he wrote this book that was actually published this year. This is actually his brother Franklin. And so, like, when I say that it's personal and it's real and we know Wayne and we support him, I mean, it is. So I will just put an emphasis on Wayne's book. He's a beacon, and yeah, and he is definitely someone who is supporting unity in this time.
Thank you so much, Sumi, and to everyone for this delightful conversation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Amy, Eric, Sumi, and our wonderful moderator, Karen. And thank you all to everyone tuning in to today's webinar. I hope you are feeling inspired and excited to take back what you learned today to your organizations and to continue these conversations with your colleagues and your families and your communities. So you'll receive an email tomorrow from me, actually, with the recording of this conversation and a feedback survey. If you'd like to connect with the Chamber Foundation about what we're doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, feel free to drop me a note directly at kglantz, KGLANTZ, @uschamber.com. And with that, I just want to thank you all for showing up today. Stay healthy and well. Thank you.
Take good care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.